Welcome. Welcome to the Holy Land today. I am Mother Lori Atwater, and today I want to bring you an update to our message called Straight Talk on the Strait of Hormuz. Since our earlier presentation, the story has become even more serious. This is no longer a question of whether Iran can threaten the Strait of Hormuz. Today, Reuters reporting says Iran is now redefining what the Strait of Hormuz even is. Let's go back and look at this ancient location. This is an old map and it shows different languages. It's showing Arabic, Farsi, English. And I tell you, this is a World War scenario, and battles in this area have gone on for quite some time. According to Reuters, an Iranian Revolutionary Guards officer said Iran now sees the strait not as a narrow corridor around a few islands, but as a much broader, vast operational area stretching from Jast in the east to Siri Island in the west. Reuters says Iranian media describes the width of this zone as expanding from roughly 20 to 30 miles to as much as 200 to 300 miles, forming what they call a complete crescent. In plain English, Iran is not merely threatening traffic in the strait, it appears to be trying to redefine the strategic map itself and normalize a far larger zone of Iranian operational control. That's why this update matters. The issue now is not simply whether ships can pass through. The issue is whether the world will accept Iran acting as if it gets to decide who moves, where they move, and under what terms they move through one of the most important maritime choke points on Earth. Let's take another look at this from a shipping lane standpoint. So you can see from this map that tankers travel along narrow lanes that are vulnerable to attack. And a lot of these lanes, where they're located, is based on the depth of the ocean that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. You can see it's a major shipping lane here. It's a curve that happens here. And then over here in the Persian Gulf. But the water itself is relatively shallow until it gets out here into the Gulf of Oman. You can also see from this map where the U.S. military bases are. We think that maybe our military bases are only in Germany. Maybe we hear about a military base in Germany, or we know somebody who's on a base in Japan. But in the Middle East, there are U.S. military bases in Saudi Arabia, here in Saudi Arabia, and here off the coast. And Bahrain is this little island here, a little island country, Bahrain, and also this little island country, Qatar or Qatar. So you can see that there are military bases there. This is the Middle East. Up in Kuwait, there's two different military bases in Kuwait, another small country on the Persian Gulf. And the reason why it's called the Persian Gulf, of course, is because that's the ancient name for Iran. And you can see there are no U.S. military bases in Iran. But who knows? The U.S. may be trying to change that. So the issue is not simply whether ships can pass through, but whether Iran is going to take more authority. I mean, basically, this area here is about 20 miles I mean, there's a channel off the coast of California that we cross to get to Catalina Island, and that's 20 miles. So I have a feel for, it seems like a large area. And we do see ships there. There's oil derricks in that channel. But when you look at the depth of the water, and then you also look at that over the last 4 decades of this terrorist regime in Iran, they have been working very diligently to plant mines and all kind of detonating devices in this area because they knew that eventually this standoff was going to come. Reuters analysis today warned that the danger is no longer just closure versus reopening. The danger is that selective access may become a new norm, where Tehran, the capital of Iran, is deciding which ships may pass and which may not. That would be a profound shift. It would mean that instead of free navigation governed by international law, one revolutionary regime would become the practical gatekeeper of the Gulf's most critical sea lane. That is not a technical maritime dispute. It is a geopolitical power grab. Now, let me say this plainly. The Strait of Hormuz has always mattered because of geography. It is the narrow passage connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman. This is the Persian Gulf. This is the Gulf of Oman. Now, to look back, I think it's better to take a look at a broader view of the world sometimes. If you're geographically challenged, we can see that the Mediterranean Sea is here. Israel is this little country here. Egypt is here. Syria is north of Israel. Turkey is north of there. And of course, Europe. You can see Greece, and then Europe is further to the west. Iran is this large country here. Iraq, Iran, and so forth. And then Saudi Arabia is another large country. So between Saudi Arabia and Iran, there is the Persian Gulf. And then this Strait of Hormuz is a small sliver, and that is the contention of what's going on. The Arabian Gulf is here, and that's out into the wide open sea. This narrow passage connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea, it is the exit corridor for massive quantities of oil, gas, and commerce. But now the question is sharpened into something even more fundamental. Who owns the water, and by what right? Out in the middle of the ocean, the answer has long been the old idea of mer liberum, the free sea. The free sea, the wide open seas. They're not supposed to belong to one nation. But closer to shore, things get more complicated. Hey, even the United States. United States, our military, not our U.S. Navy actually, but our merchant marines and Coast Guard monitor and control what's off our coast. And certainly the coastal area between our islands, like Catalina Island and so forth on the west coast, and then other islands like Bermuda and some other islands that are off the coast on the east coast, those are definitely controlled by United States powers. But when you get out into the open sea, it's navigated by international law. Reuters legal explainer from April laid out the core dispute very clearly. Under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, a coastal state can claim territorial waters extending 12 nautical miles from its coastline. But if that claim includes a strait used for international navigation, then the right of passage still matters. Reuters reported that Iran argues it can regulate traffic there, while the United States argues that freedom of navigation must remain intact. Reuters also noted that even though Washington and Tehran have not both ratified the treaty in the same way, the underlying rules are widely treated as customary international law. And certainly, if you look at these countries that are in this area here, you've got quite a few. You've got India off the Arabian Sea, or the Gulf of, this is the Gulf of Oman, and then this is the outer Arabian Sea. You got India, Pakistan, Iran, Oman, United Arab Emirates, which is this part right here, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, all in this area. Oh, Kuwait too. Kuwait's up in here, right here. And all of these nations are dependent on these waterways being open. You know, the dynamics has changed quite a bit, but clearly, the ancient nation of Iran, ancient Persia, knew this battle was coming. They've prepared themselves for it. And the United States has been saying, not so. In other words, Iran cannot have it both ways. It cannot say, these are our territorial waters, and therefore we may charge tolls, stop ships at will, or decide who gets through, while ignoring the legal obligation to permit lawful navigation. Reuters' legal explainer also said that charging transit fees or tolls for passage through the strait would break the law as maritime lawyers understand it. That is why the conflict is not just military, it is legal, it is diplomatic, it is strategic, and it is moral. Because once one state succeeds in turning an international choke point into a political toll booth, the president reaches far beyond the Gulf. Reuters also connected this dispute to an older case that is worth remembering. In the late 1940s, Britain and Albania clashed over passage through the Corfu Channel. Mines killed sailors, and the issue went to the International Court of Justice, which ruled that Britain had the right of passage and that Albania had the duty to keep the strait clear of mines. That precedent still matters because it reminds us that narrow channels used for international passage are not supposed to be places where a coastal state can terrorize navigation. But what have we been seeing? Now, as Reuters also made clear, precedence alone does not guarantee compliance. Albania complied. Iran is a far larger, more heavily armed, and more ideologically driven power. That is why today's situation is so dangerous. Now, you cannot ignore the ideology behind Iran's Revolutionary Guard. It is, without apology, a jihadist organization. This is well known, it's not disputed. What does it mean to be jihadist? It means that there is a belief that all peoples, all nations should fall under their religious domination. This was the state in the region under the Ottoman Empire. There was no freedom of religion. There was no rights for women. I was looking at a picture earlier today that showed the picture of a woman walking through the streets of Tehran in let me see if I can pull it up. Yeah, I found it. The picture of this woman walking through the streets of Tehran. Okay, and I want to take the time to actually show you a picture of her, so that there's no confusion about what is going on there. We're going to go ahead and just have her picture here, so that you can see it. I had to pull it down so that I could show it to you. Let's talk about what's at stake here. Since the takeover of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in 1947, basically the Shah of Iran, now that was a kingdom, was deposed, exiled, and the revolution promised all kinds of things. But once they came into power, one of the first things they did was require that women wear the burqa. This is a completely covered woman. She's from head to toe. Even her shoes are black. She's covered. This is a requirement for women in Iran today. When they're in public, they have to be completely covered. This is not freedom as we understand it. And you can see the poster in the back showing Iran with a fist controlling this strait. It's showing all these ships that are bottlenecked up in here, that the ships coming from Kuwait and United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Qatar, they're all bottlenecked up while Iran is controlling that strait. Yeah, we cannot allow this nation to exercise control. They have to back off. There's a time for war. And Ecclesiastes says that there's a time for peace and times for war. We don't like that. The concept there's a time for war. I'm saying we as Americans, we like to believe that everybody sits around the table, holds hands, and comes to agreement. Not with jihadists. They want to take over. And if they oppose you and you don't comply, they slit your throat. That is exactly the future that they see for the United States of America, and certainly for Israel. There is no negotiation. This battle over this choke point has wider implications. And there's another reason this update matters. We've seen something like this before. During the Iraq-Iran War of the 1980s, the conflict spread into the Gulf. Iran and Iraq stopped and attacked ships in the Persian Gulf as each side tried to strangle the other's oil export and punish its allies. Iraqi aircraft struck ships linked to Iran. Iranian forces intercepted and attacked ships bound for Iraq and the Gulf Arab states supporting Iraq. What followed became known as the Tanker War. It was a small naval war by global standards, but a deadly one. Merchant shipping became a front line. Hundreds of commercial vessels were damaged. Civilian sailors died in large number. Even American warships were pulled into the violence. That memory matters now because when people imagine that a maritime confrontation will stay neat and limited, history says otherwise. It spreads. It entangles outsiders. It kills civilians. It drags commercial shipping into combat zones. Reuters' recent coverage of the current war, including ships damaged and sailors killed, shows how quickly that pattern can return. That's why United States naval leaders have worried about Hormuz for years. Reuters reported back in 2012 that Admiral Jonathan Greenert, then the U.S. Navy's top officer, said, "If you ask me what keeps me awake at night, it's the Strait of Hormuz and the business going on in the Arabian Gulf." That was not an exaggeration. It was recognition of the kind of battle space this is. The waters are narrow, civilian traffic is dense, shore-based missiles, mines, drones, patrol craft, and larger warships can all be compressed into a very small arena. Naval thinkers have often used the image of a knife fight in a phone booth to describe warfare in such a tight maritime space. Whatever exact officer, use that, phrasing first, the point is obvious. The closer and more crowded the fight, the faster it becomes deadly and uncontrollable. Reuters' recent reporting on attacks, mines, and damaged vessels in the Strait shows that this is not theoretical. It is exactly the kind of environment that military planners fear. Now, before we continue on with this update on the Strait of Hormuz, I want to step back again and look at the world stage. When we look at these nations, we don't see the United States. Okay? So, yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of, we call this an isolationist mentality, where people say, hey, this doesn't really have anything to do with us. I mean, this is the Middle East. Why don't we just mind our own business? Well, the thing is, as you're seeing with the price of oil and so forth, the things that are happening in the Middle East, Northern Africa, around the Mediterranean Gulf, these waterways, our ships are doing commerce with the world. When you have a free society, when you have what we've had since World War II, largely after Japan was defeated, and it was a horrible defeat because we end up using a nuclear weapon to stop the Japanese. The Japanese at that time were intent on conquering the world. They were a totalitarian regime. It was a kingdom, and they were exerting their influence in the area around Japan, China, Taiwan, all of those areas. And their totalitarian bent threatened us when they attacked Pearl Harbor. Okay, there was just no way we were going to stay out of the war against Japan at that point. We were also taking a look at Nazi Germany. Here again, during World War II, Nazi Germany had taken control of Germany, a totalitarian dictator by the name of Adolf Hitler, where, again, the rights of people were suppressed. If you didn't consent to the Nazis, you were investigated, thrown in prison, or murdered. During World War II, Jews were rounded up, not only in Germany, but in France and Austria and Poland and they were crowded into confined spaces, forced into uh, slave labor, and murdered in gas chambers. That was under the regime, the Nazi regime in Germany at that time. Once Nazi Germany was conquered, and basically they had to completely bow the knee. And the same thing with the Japanese. It took war to conquer Japan, that they would bow the knee to the West, what was called the West at that time and since then. And because of that, we have enjoyed peace and global commerce and a raise in the status of women worldwide, raise in terms of tolerance for different people groups. So a lot of benefits that have happened. And so there are times when it's not possible to stay out of the fight. So even though this fight is away from our borders, and we're glad that it's away from our borders, our American men and women, and not only our military men and women, but civilians as well who provide support, are in this area of the world. And it looks like this is not going to be over soon. So let's talk about what has changed since our earlier presentation last month. Reuters reported last week that the strait had been virtually shut since the conflict began, cutting off roughly a fifth of global oil supplies and trapping ships and crews in the Gulf. So obviously, the commerce, the economy that Saudi Arabia depends on, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, United Arab Emirates, has been choked off. Who's benefited? Well, United States, people can come to us to get oil. They can come to us to get liquefied natural gas, and they do. I mean, really, from a completely selfish standpoint, the United States could say, we're benefiting from the choking that's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. We won't, we're making money off of it. You guys will solve it. That was part of the reason why President Trump said to European leaders who are energy constrained, you need to come and be a part of this fight. We don't need the oil that passes through the strait. We don't need the liquefied natural gas that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. We don't, not in the United States. And yet we are there for ideological reasons, because we don't want to see, even though it's not talked about in the news, we as Americans do not want to see the hindrance to the liberties that we enjoy. So the United States began this operation and has not only mandating that we constrain Iran as a jihadist organization and that they should not have nuclear weapons, when you understand their ideology, no, they cannot have nuclear weapons, is because they would try to control the free world and make everyone like themselves. Reuters also reported that U.S. officials discussed the Hormuz crisis with close allies, including United Kingdom and Australia. And wasn't it interesting that the King of England, the King of the UK, King Charles, came to the United States, and spent some time talking with the president and other leaders. He is not a world leader in the sense that that many kings are, but he wanted to exert his influence. The picture today is one of military pressure, humanitarian concern for trapped crews, legal arguments over navigation, and a live diplomatic effort all happening at the same time. But even that is no longer the whole story. Today, Reuters reporting suggests Iran is trying to move from disruption to normalization. In other words, Tehran may be seeking to make its enlarged operational area the accepted reality. Reuters commentary said a few sanctioned shipments have already passed with Iran's approval, which suggests Tehran may be trying to establish a system of selected permission rather than outright closure. And this is a very dangerous evolution. If the world accepts selected transmit under Iranian approval, then Iran has effectively gained a form of political custody over the strait without even winning legal recognition for it. That would mean power replacing law. It would also mean that every Gulf exporter, every Asian importer, every insurer, and every Navy would have to calculate not just the geography of the strait, but the whims of Tehran. And that brings me to the moral and spiritual point I always want to make on this program. This is not just about freight rates, oil cargoes, and naval platform patterns. This is about the kind of order the nations will accept. I support Israel, and I do not apologize for that. Iran and its proxies must stop attacking Israel in her biblically given territory. Peace cannot come at any price. A false peace that rewards terror, coercion, and maritime blackmail is not peace at all. It is a pause that prepares the next round of violence. And when Iran tries to leverage Hormuz, at the same time it pressures Israel through a larger confrontation, the world should not pretend these are unrelated stories. They are connected. The same regime that threatens navigation also threatens Israel's security and regional stability. So where are we today? We're at a point where the legal question, the military question, and the prophetic question are all touching each other. The legal question is whether the strait remains governed by freedom of navigation or whether Iran can turn it into a controlled zone. The military question is whether outside powers are willing to contest that claim and at what cost. The prophetic question for believers is whether the nations will keep pressuring Israel while tolerating those who surround and threaten her. Reuters today shows that this conflict is not standing still, it's moving. The map itself is being rhetorically and strategically redrawn by Iran. So my straight update is this. The danger in Hormuz has grown. Iran is no longer merely talking about closing a narrow waterway. It is speaking and acting as though a much broader maritime zone now falls under its operational authority. That changes the stakes. It means the fight is no longer just whether the ships can get through this week. It's over whether a new regional order will be accepted in which Tehran becomes the effective arbiter of movement through one of the world's vital sea lanes. The United States and its allies clearly do not want that. The Gulf states do not want that. Energy importers do not want that. And anyone who cares about lawful order on the seas should not want that either. I want to close by saying this to the church and to all who are watching. We should pray for wisdom, courage, and truth. We should pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We should pray for Israel's protection. We should pray against false peace and against solutions that reward aggression. And we should understand that the Strait of Hormuz is not just a map feature. It is a test. It is a test whether the world still believes in lawful passage, lawful order, and resistance to coercion. Now, I'm going to pause because as a person who travels to Israel, we have a team preparing to go to Israel in June. We have not purchased our tickets, but we do have our itinerary ready to go. We are located, Iran is over here. The Battle of the Strait of Hormuz is 2,000 miles away from where we would be in Israel. It's important that, as you understand, that we're flying from the United States to Israel. We are not going into a war zone. Even if the United States decides to resume hostilities against Iran and wrestle control of the Strait of Hormuz away from them, clear the mines out of this area. If all of that could be going on, and we would be in Israel, enjoying peace and safety. Why is that? Because last year, uh, Israel and the United States flew into Iran and destroyed their air force and much of their ballistic missile capabilities. And so Iran was shooting missiles over Iraq and Jordan into Israel, and its proxies in Lebanon and the Gaza Strip and down here in Yemen, those proxies of Iran were firing on Israel. Well, since those proxies and their military capability have been severely damaged, like 90%, is what is reported, Israel is in a much safer situation. Israel is not hiding in bunkers, even with the threat of the Hamas in the Gaza Strip and Hezbollah in Lebanon. They really have moved into a maintenance mode in terms of these evil forces that want to just turn the whole world into Islamic Jihad. I, for one, am not interested in being under a jihadist rule. I don't know about you, but that is not something that I want for myself or for my children. We must pray. We must pray that not just for peace, but it's a war of evil against evil. This is a test. This battle over the Strait of Hormuz and what's going on there is a test where the world believes in lawful passage, lawful order, and resistance to coercion. Are we just gonna bend over? I mean, are we just gonna do whatever you want? If this choke point becomes a place where power alone decides who moves and who stops, then the implications will be felt far beyond the Gulf. But if the nations insist that strategic waterways remain open and that aggression does not earn new rights, then this crisis may yet become a line that the world refuses to cross. What do you think? Do you think it's peace at any price? Do you think that there's a time for war? It's an interesting discussion because it's an armchair discussion because our military keeps us safe. I'm thankful for living in the United States. We do have the strongest military in the world. And sometimes we don't really recognize how we benefit from that. This has been the Holy Land Today. I'm Mother Lori Atwater, and this has been my update, Straight Talk on the Strait for Hormuz. God bless you and keep you. And I pray that you and your family are always safe and in God's care.